Greetings, welcome to the studio. Thank you for being here, thank you for attending. I'm Harry, and this evening we're going to have none other than Philip Marsden, author of Rising Ground. So hope you're ready. We'll wait a couple of minutes just to get a few more people on. While we're doing this, I've got a slightly new audio setup, so I wonder if you could actually, using chat, if you could tell me, give me the thumbs up if you hear me okay, if you don't get a hiss or if you don't get any kind of feedback or interference or anything like that. If you use your feedback feature to actually give me an indication that you have got good audio, that would really be helpful. So yeah, when you're ready, go ahead. Now, just a couple of things, a couple of announcements on the studio. Wonderful, we've got one come up. That's excellent. Yes, that's great. Other people, if you could just tell me, yes, excellent, give me a thumbs up, wonderful, that's great, cool. While we're at it also, I wonder, could you actually include in the chat, please, where are you at right now? What country, what town are you in right at the moment? If you could write that on chat, that would be really great too. Excellent. Lots of thumbs up coming through, so that's great stuff. Thank you, folks. Thank you so much for being here, all of you. We still wait for a few more people. We've got 8 so far. We should have a few more coming. So yeah, so when you can, if you can actually just write the town or city or country you're actually coming from, and that would be fantastic. You can also put that in the chat. That would be great. Just out of curiosity, that would be really wonderful to know. I hope it's far and wide. One of the things about tonight, just setting the scene, what I want to do is move away from the idea of audience. What I want to do is engage through this technology in a different way, make it far more participatory. And when I say away from the idea of audience, I mean, oh wonderful, Julie Mears from Michigan, USA, welcome. Move away from the idea of audience to the idea of community of interest. The bottom line is that we're all here because we're stakeholders and we share a particular interest. And I want to tap into that body of knowledge and make these events far more participatory, far more interactive within the limitations of the technology, absolutely. So yeah. So if you could tell me where you're coming from, what town, what country, that would be absolutely great. That would be fantastic. How we're going to run this tonight and all future conversations is that we are not going to leave space for Q&A, but we'd like your participation through comments and questions as part of the conversation, so that then we actually weave them in to the narrative of this evening and to every other narrative for every other conversation slot that we actually have. So that would be really good to know. Felicity Warmer, I'm in Falmouth at the moment. Lovely to be here. Yes, thank you so much for being here. That's great, Felicity. Thank you for commenting. Excellent. Who else, please? We've got 11 so far, so we're still waiting for a few more people. Another announcement. I've recently, yesterday, as a matter of fact, I've made arrangements with a New York street photographer who's really interesting stuff. He produces superb photographs, almost photographing the unphotographable in a very kind of traditional way, but with a very modern twist. and he will be exhibiting his work at the HF studio next month in September. We don't know a date yet. He will have an exhibition of photographs. He will also be in conversation with me, telling us more about his method of work, his ideas, and his take on New York, bearing in mind that he's a European living in New York. So he's actually an outsider, you could say, looking at New York. So this could be very, very interesting. And that's within the tradition of many American photographers, street photographers in particular, like Robert Frank. He was Swiss. So he had the outsider's point of view. Sheila Harper, wonderful. You're in New Key. Thank you so much. Great. Karen Tiliakos, New Mexico, USA. Fantastic. That's great. Excellent. Folks, yes, if you could actually just keep them coming, keep those chats coming. Where are you based? What city? What town? What country? That would be great, great, great to know. That would be really wonderful. Please remember that we depend very much in these conversations on your interaction through chat. I don't have a script. I don't have an auto cue. I have nothing. I'm just winging it here. And this is how I've actually arranged it. We've spoken about this with all our guest speakers. We don't want a PowerPoint presentation. We don't want to be cardboard cutouts. We want something that is inclusive and that is spontaneous. And we rely, this kind of approach relies very much on audience participation. So, what town are you from? What country are you from? Reveal yourself. We've got 12 people so far. Cool. Excellent. So yeah, the American photographer, he's really interesting. So he'll be here next month. We'll be in conversation, and we're looking into, we're not quite sure how we're going to do it, but we're looking into some sort of activity that will run either a workshop or a walk and talk live in New York, something along those lines. But we'll come up with some sort of original idea. But I'll tell you more next week. Or John Webb, Toronto, Canada. Hello, John. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being here, all of you. Thank you so much. Harry, where are you speaking from? I'm based in Cornwall, England, in the town of Saltash, just outside on the borders of Plymouth. What we say on next to the River Tamar, which actually is the division, the border between the two counties of Devon on the west and Cornwall on the east. According to local people, I am on the right side of the Tamar. That carries an awful lot of weight here. Elaine, my speakers are set to 100%, but at first quiet audio has now dropped out completely. Oh my dear. What's this? No. That's... How about other people? Can other people hear me okay? Can I have a thumbs up? Can other people hear me okay? Yeah, excellent. Elaine, I'm not quite sure what that might be. I have a feeling it might be your end. I don't know your setup, but I would check out your end to actually find out what's happening. I'm not absolutely certain. How about other people? Can other people hear me okay? Felicity, I can hear. Yeah, John, yeah. Elaine, I think you try your side. I think it's your side. I think over here we are okay. Felicity is fine. John is fine. Julie is absolutely fine. Yeah, I'm getting thumbs up. That's great. Fantastic. Thank you so much for participating, folks. So yeah, going back to the original point. What I want to do is get away from this idea of audience, right? So that it's a one-way system, TV, radio, Zoom. I'm not interested in that. I want to actually tap in to your wealth. I've been teaching for 20 years, more than 20 years, and I know from personal experience that people bring with them a huge wealth of knowledge, right? And I want to tap into that knowledge and bring it into part of our conversation, so that then we can actually weave your questions, your concerns, your comments, so that they're woven into part of the fabric of this conversation that we're actually creating. As such, I'm inviting you into the living room. Right? So by all means, comment and ask questions. Also, if you would like to actually comment amongst yourselves, engage in a dialogue amongst yourselves, that is absolutely fine. Please do that as well, right? So don't feel that you just have to be there passive and take it all in. So that's absolutely fine. Cool. Okay, I've spoken enough. So enough of me here, folks. Without further ado, I'm delighted to introduce you to
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I could hear you now. Yeah.
Yep. Can
Yeah.
everyone hear?
Okay.
Hear
Can
me?
you hear us now?
Okay.
Yes, you can hear us now. Excellent. That's fine. Good. Sorry about that, folks. Slight technical glitch there. Thank you for letting me know. Thank you for letting me know. That's good. Excellent. This is what live chat is all about. This is what community of interest is all about. Yes, we're back. Felicity, thank you so much. Appreciate your feedback. So, as I was saying before, I'll just backtrack a little bit. Then. We've both Philip and I, it's interesting because we didn't know each other before doing my work. And it's interesting, I thought, because we've both started covering this notion of the spirit of place. Philip through photography, through writing, through his writings, and me through my photography. And the common thing is Bodmin Moor, this area of high ground in Cornwall, which actually has a wealth of archaeology dating back from the Neolithic. And just a second. Let me see. Okay. Could you say something, Philip, please, for me?
Yes, am I still on air? Can you hear me?
Yes, you're still there. Just have a little warning sign. That's okay. I think we're okay. Cool. So, could you tell us more about the idea of?
Yeah. Yes, I mean, for me, the spirit of place, I came to it specifically in about when was it? About 9 years ago now, actually.
Right.
And sort of brought together a lot of things that I realized that I'd been sort of thinking about, and Spirit of Place sort of embodied that. I'd spent sort of 10 or 20 years traveling in the Middle East and in Eastern Africa and in the Soviet Union, particularly in the last few years, and writing about those places and sort of being drawn to them for different reasons. And I came to sort of embody Cornwall, which I'd known so well for all my life in different ways, and again had a different sort of set of attractions for me, a different set of questions. Mm-hmm. And it coincided for me with moving to an old farmhouse, and having a rather alarming experience of literally falling in love with the place. I mean, all that sort of heady kind of heart beating faster, the sort of moodiness of when I saw this place, and with my family, we all sort of fell in love with it, and the process of moving and sort of getting the house was just tantalizing. It's sort of terrifying courtship. And it highlights to me just how powerful and emotionally involved a place can be. We live in such a sort of abstracted world. Here we are talking to each other from all over different places, and I think it paradoxically that brought specific places more to the fore. We sort of respond, and a lot. I feel I've talked to a lot of people and picked up the same sense of this sort of deep yearning to reconnect with place. Something which traditionally was there in traditional societies, and perhaps is one of the things about our world, about the sort of contemporary world, which has been lost, and therefore it's in its loss, a bit like the natural world and our disconnection with that. Place has this sort of slight sense of a need to reconnect with it. So I explored it specifically through Cornwall, with my own connection, with my own particular sort of period of my life, and with my family. I was going through the sort of doing up this house and exploring properly Cornwall for the first time. I mean, I've been connected with Cornwall all my life, but I really sort of wanted to burrow into its so many different facets of it. And like you, I came to Bodmin Moor, and that seemed to be the place that it began, that embodied so much of what I wanted to write about. And in particular, it was this sense that you mentioned in your introduction, of the layeredness of the place. And again, so much of our sort of contemporary world is sort of so thickly layered with the contemporary, that we lose that sense of the deep, layered, storied, timed sort of sense of place. And Bodmin Moor, because it hasn't been intensively farmed, it hasn't been developed in any way, it's a place which you can really sort of go to and sense these layers. And archaeologically, it's fascinating. Historically, it's interesting. And it's a place, in my book, Rising Ground, I began to explore this sense of story, I suppose. I mean, it always, for me, comes back to story. One can talk about archaeology, one can talk about different periods, one can talk about different meanings of places. But I think that what we do with places, we do with so many different things, we put narrative to it. And I think that the sort of cold stone monuments of Bodmin Moor, actually, they embody story, and they embody stories which we can never reconnect, but we can sense that they once had those stories attached to them.
Very much so.
That's, yeah. I mean, that's sort of how I came to Cornwall, and how I came to Bodmin Moor, and how I used it to sort of reach out again into the sort of universal notion of place, and our own particular yearning, our own particular times sort of need and urgency to re-engage with particular places.
Absolutely. I think you're absolutely right there. Let me pull in a comment here. Felicity. We hardly have adequate language to describe this almost visceral feeling, love for place. Yes, I think this is what we're talking about, Felicity. Thank you so much for that comment. That's bang on. It is that. Yeah, go ahead.
I take that as a challenge, actually, because I mean, you're a photographer, I'm a writer. I mean, yeah. Felicity, you say we hardly have the language, and I tried, to put language to it and put story to it, and I think you're right. I mean, like all the best things, we struggle to express them, but that's what makes it worthwhile. Yeah. And actually, I find, I mean, that a place like Bodmin Moor brings out a language, brings out a particular poetry, for better word, that sort of extraordinary sort of spell which emotion and language sort of weave around each other. And standing, for instance, standing in the middle of Bodmin Moor and sort of trying to sort of connect with it, to me as a writer, brings out language, and I need to do it. But it's not it falls short inevitably, and all one can try to do is sort of point people towards it. So, yes, I mean, you're quite right, Felicity, but that is the challenge.
Absolutely. Yes, definitely. It's interesting because when I went to Bodmin Moor, I first encountered the hurlers, the three stone circles near the village of Minions, just on the edge of Bodmin Moor. And I went there, I was there on a foggy morning and very misty morning, early in the morning. I wanted to catch the sunrise, and was my introduction to the stone monuments. As I walked in the mist, this thick morning mist, as I walked, the landscape began to reveal itself, gradually began to reveal itself through the mist. And then the mist cleared, and it was a wonderful sunny day, and the landscape was completely different. And then it was at that point, that experience, that feeling of the place, really, that was of ancient mystery, archaic, not from this era, that I could feel connected to the place in some way. I felt that this was a fascinating place to actually explore. Felicity, another comment, sorry. And you have used the language beautifully, but it's hard to describe the liminal experience.
I mean that's right. Going back to what you were saying about this, I mean, some of you may be familiar with what Harry was talking about, the site in the southeast of Bodmin Moor, where there are three stone circles, or the sort of remains of three stone circles, quite close to each other. And like all stone circles, they have this sort of capacity to sort of, for anyone going there, for you to think, what the hell's happening? Why were they built? Who built them? When were they built? All this sort of thing, and why three next to each other? And then there's this on the skyline. There's a place called Stowe's Pound, which is what's known as an enclosure, a sort of hedged enclosure, walled enclosure, and there's the remnants of a wall around one of these extraordinary natural features of stacked bits of granite. There's also the cheese ring there as well, but Stowe's Pound, which is a really early, one of the sort of earliest sites on Bodmin Moor. And the thought is, like so many of the sites on Bodmin Moor and elsewhere, is that there is some sort of relationship between the obviously man-made stone circles and the skyline appearance of Stowe's Pound. And that's one of the particular things about Bodmin Moor, and what it sort of has revealed to archaeologists and their interpretation is the relationship between the monuments and the skyline features, the tors in particular, and all referring very clearly to one particular hill, Routor, which itself is extraordinary. But there is, once you begin to look into it, and you can explore this, and you can explore it through sort of academic articles and archaeologists' own work. But equally, you can explore it on foot, or as I did, and you can possibly do both. So you have, I had a photocopy of the article, because they describe about how a stone row, for instance, just beneath Leskernick, to the east of Routor, there's a stone row, and as you walk along the stones, the top of Routor disappears behind a nearer hill, and as you come to the end of the stone row, it appears. And so clearly, this is, well, I mean, it's still speculation, but it's fairly convincing that that's the purpose of it. And to reveal this sacred hill is an extraordinary moment that we can reenact ourselves by walking along. And I think what you were saying about Minions, Harry, going to those places, and I think that's what's so moving to me about Bodmin Moor and so many of the richer landscapes, is that in a sense, us being there, coming across these monuments, speculating, is exactly what one supposes people in the Neolithic did, and why they built those monuments. So it brings this extraordinary sort of resonance across millennia of a response to place, and interestingly, it's natural features. It's those natural features of the tors. There's some speculation that there might be a notion that they were sort of ancestrally constructed, that people in the Neolithic, say, perceived these very ambiguous natural features, as we understand them, as some the work of giants or the work of ancestors. but we know them as natural features. And I think this relationship between man-made and the physical and our own human responses to the natural world, to the shape of the land, is what we can re-participate in. And it's what we do. It's what every walker on Bodmin Moor does. And it's a place you can really sort of explore those liminal feelings, as you mentioned, Felicity.
Absolutely. Yes, indeed. It's interesting because I was in Minions on the hurlers only a couple of weeks ago with an archaeologist, an astronomer, archaeoastronomer, Carolyn Kennett, who's actually will be participating in the conversations in a couple of weeks' time. And we walked from the hurlers, from the three stone circles up towards Rillerton Barrow, which is an ancient burial chamber where they found some gold cups dating from the Bronze Age. Certainly Bronze Age, not as late as not as early as the Iron Age. And at one moment, as we were walking up the hill, all of a sudden I realized, but hang on, we were following the processional road that they'd uncovered in 2014. And I realized that we're reenacting what people did thousands, millennia of years ago. We're looking at Neolithic, Bronze Age, so we're looking at around 4,000 years ago. We were reenacting that path of going from the circles up the hill towards the Rillerton Barrow. And we all kind of stopped at that moment, and it was that moment of the realization, because we hadn't actually done it intentionally, but that is what we were doing. So this idea of reenactment, yes, I think you're absolutely right. Also, what you were saying, this idea of relating to the spirit of place, somehow that belonging, that is definitely the case in Neolithic and Bronze Age people. They cremated, they honored, they ritually honored and celebrated the dead. And I think this is where we have this connection with the landscape. We belong to the land, and the narrative of the land is part of our narrative as well. But before we carry on, there's John has a comment here. Routor, very well described in the Time Team episode. Yes, the Time Team have an excellent program. They discovered a few very interesting and very revealing artifacts there as well. I watched that. Thank you, John. That comment is very timely.
They explored, I think, in particular those what a Bronze Age. It was a Bronze Age settlement on the west slope of Routor, and also a sort of strange bank to the north of the settlement, which was used for tank practice during the Second World War, and it's cut into it, and you can see where it's been sort of sectioned and cut into. You can see this quite sophisticated sort of stonework, and again, no one really knows what that bank was for. I mean, it wasn't tank practice originally.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, because I was photographing there. It's not included in my photographs, but I was photographing there. And if I remember correctly, they think, and this is according to the Time Team, they think it might even be earlier. They think it might be Mesolithic. So it might be considerably earlier. And if that's the case, that's probably one of the earliest features on Bodmin Moor.
I mean, because what's interesting about the late Bronze Age and the late Neolithic and the early Bronze Age is that until then the sort of monuments were not domestic, and then suddenly you get at the beginning of the Bronze Age, 1500 BC, very loosely, you suddenly get settlements. You get domestic, the remains of settlements. And also the end of the sort of ritual monuments, the sort of strange, ambiguous monuments that we were talking about earlier on, like stone circles, and the bank exactly. And I think one of the things I'm not an archaeologist. I like you, I spoke and walked with archaeologists and spent a lot of time reading archaeology about Bodmin Moor.
Mm-hmm.
But they have this sort of sense of speculation as what, you know, that they're allowed to make, that in a sense we can participate in as well. But I find it, one of the sort of processes I went through was to see it as actually the extraordinary time differences between these periods. You look at the Bronze Age settlement and the bank, you think, okay, obviously these relate to each other in some way. Thousands of years between them, probably. And it's that strange thing about Stonehenge, where the trilithons, what we think of as Stonehenge, is much closer to our own time than it is to the original use of that site. So you have to. I found in trying to interpret these places, you have to sort of get into that, which is one of the rewarding things of it, to get into that sort of deep time thought process, which is so far removed from our own sort of ephemeral, impatient view of the ticking clock.
Yeah.
It's a whole different thing, and it is. And again, Bodmin Moor is a place where you can really begin to sort of step back into that, and to sort of step away from what we are accustomed to. The only thing that the A30 that bisects it is a sudden reminder as you see these cars in the distance sort of going up and down. But the whole timescale that one begins to sort of access through those sites is a completely different thing. And one of the great rewards about a place like Bodmin Moor.
Yes, absolutely. It's thought provoking, and I think it's the in my view at least, it's the stillness of the place. Certainly photographing there were times when hours and hours and hours I wouldn't see a soul. I would be because I go photographing on my own. I wouldn't see another person around for hours, and it was kind of remarkable. And that kind of experience today, when over half the world lives in cities. So the idea of not seeing anyone for, I don't know, half a day or a full day is almost out of the equation. There's no such thing as that. And I think it's that very particular conditions of Bodmin Moor that somehow encourage us, dare I say, to connect. There's another comment here. Sheila Harper. There's approximately 30 human generations in 1,000 years. So even the Neolithic is touchable. That's a very interesting way of putting it. I'm going to put that up again. Sheila, thank you so much. Wow, yes.
But touchable through place. I mean, how else can one engage with it? And obviously not through letters. There's no history that survives, and monuments and these extraordinary series of monuments are the only thing. And I think what interested me about Bodmin Moor particularly was this interpretation of it as a sacred or ritual landscape. Mm-hmm. And again, it's a sort of slight re-engagement with the way that archaeological monuments are interpreted and understood, not as being monuments isolated in comparison with similar things elsewhere, but actually in relation to the immediate environment around them. And it's a sort of fascinating. I find it a fascinating sort of archaeological interpretation that actually this was perceived. Not again, it wasn't thought, okay, we'll put a stone circle here, we'll put a prop stone here, or whatever. The whole landscape was significant, sacred perhaps, ritual perhaps, but significant, and perhaps over memories and generations as a sort of meeting place. But it wasn't just the isolated monument. It was what we can see. And there's a sort of strange thing that again I was reminded of, sort of reading around the subject that when I did at that time, was that in traditional society, you're only familiar really with what you can walk to within half a day. That was the sort of traditional engagement with the world. You might go to market sort of 2 or 3 days, but actually what you see around you, say 10 miles sort of in any direction, that was the place, that was the world. And if one sort of goes back into that sort of scale of place, again, it's a sort of re-engagement with perhaps a more traditional type of relation to the natural world. And these sacred landscapes or ritual landscapes have been identified sort of all over the world. I mean, Stonehenge is the obvious one, which was, we think of as a monument. It's in fact 16 square miles, 23 square kilometers of landscape in which are found, and increasing every year there are more finds, and it's shown to have this sort of whole collection of interpretations. If you can see monuments as the biggest stone circle was discovered a couple of years ago, many miles from Stonehenge itself. So it was this sort of way that a landscape, a walkable landscape of 10 miles in any direction, that we can walk in half a day, which is a monument in itself, if you like. So again, as walkers, as people just simply participating with that sort of age-old ritual of putting one foot in front of another and contemplating the landscape and around you and engaging with it through physical movement. That's what we can do in ritual landscapes, sacred landscapes, rather than just standing sort of still in the middle of a cathedral, say. You're actually moving through it. And these visual engagements that you get, and relationships between monuments and the skyline begin to sort of make more sense.
Absolutely. And I think that it's interesting that you said that walking would have been the main mode and only mode almost of transport then. Either you walk, right? And I think that as you were saying that, I was thinking, yes, but that act of walking puts you very much in contact with the landscape. But literally, it's what we would call today an immersive experience. You're surrounded by it, and you walk through. Just as I was describing that morning when I arrived to the stone circles with the mist, I was discovering the landscape was revealing itself, and I think it's a very active. It's a very active action. It's a very active thing where you're not kind of removed from the landscape as in a vehicle, a motor car, a train, or some other form of transport. You're there. And I think that by being there, I think that has an effect on you. It's a bit like going into a city or going into any place. You hear the sounds. It becomes a sensory experience.
Mm-hmm. And I think, again, so different. I mean, I'm aware that we've been talking all about it in terms of the sort of dusty past and how it's sort of seeking these traditions, which may or may not have happened, but sort of an immersion, as you say, in the past. And I kind of resist that. But I mean, to some degree. But I think it does have an intense relevance to us now, and I think that's why it's such a powerful experience. And it's difficult to articulate exactly what that intensity is, but I think we all know what it is. And I think what Felicity said, it's so hard to find the words to do that. It's so hard to articulate exactly what it is that draws one to those experiences. But I think it does have to do, in one sense, to a sort of reactionary impulse against what we're familiar with and against what we sense is a corruption of traditional engagement with the world.
Yes.
That we are in so many ways sort of disconnected and wrongly attuned to the natural world and to the environment around us. That's the sort of the spirit of the age, if you like.
Absolutely.
And I think that's what gives it an urgency. And why these sacred landscapes, why these places which have been sort of eternally layered with responses have such power for us and are so important, for many of us. I mean, it's not everyone. People have different pleasures and different emotional wells to draw from, but I think all of us here probably on this broadcast share something of that, and I think it's a growing thing, and it does indicate something very profound about our age.
Absolutely.
What I think the problems we're going through.
Definitely. We've just had another comment from Sheila.
Yeah.
Sheila Harper. Thank you, Sheila. You have to let the ancient landscape lead you. Rautor, the bank, the stone-marked passageways, the propped rocks pointing you to different aspects of different aspects of the planned early landscape. Thank you, Sheila. That's you obviously know Rautor like the back of your hand. Very
And
good.
she mentioned these prop stones, which are an unusual feature of Bodmin Moor, the archaeology of Bodmin Moor, where and weren't actually they were discovered almost by chance about an amateur archaeologist called Tony Blackman, who's done an awful lot of work, who's died, but knew it like the back of his hand. And he and Pete Herring, another archaeologist, discovered these pattern of stones which you could walk past 10 times, and actually, but when you look at them closely, they're clearly not natural. They're propped up. It's what typically is one large stone propped on a smaller one, and 1,500 of these have been found at least around, and they've been discovered the whole time. So again, I mean, what, why, when, we don't know, but it's some basic response, and again, you see people coming and there's some sort of question. There's some people who disapprove of it of putting one stone on top of another and building these cairns. And it's sort of it's the same thing. These prop stones are perhaps a sort of similar impulse to that.
Absolutely. We have another comment. Felicity Warner. In walking these ancient landscapes, we have the benefit of employing all five senses: smell, touch, sight, sound, etc. And this also connects us to the everyday life of our ancestors. Yes, quite right. And I think, but also in doing so, I think there's also another thing. There's a reflexive process. At least there certainly was in me. I started thinking along the lines: how is it that thousands of years ago, generations of people through millennia lived here, yet they left so little evidence? There's practically nothing there. Yet, when you come and think about us, what we've created with the Anthropocene, burying ourselves in our own rubbish, I kind of wondered, why, God, these people, the ancients, knew a thing or two, how to actually coexist in harmony. And I think that is also part of the spirit of place of Bodmin Moor, that harmonious coexistence.
And also, I mean, you mentioned the five senses and the sort of alertness that brings. And again, I feel that's a sort of there's almost a sort of moral element to that of engaging directly with the natural world, particularly, and noticing it with all five senses is a way of celebrating it and thereby protecting it, thereby sort of examining our own relationship with it. So I think that's something, you're quite right to mention that, and walking allows those senses, if you like, a sixth sense of the transcendent sense, which often these places sort of offer us as well. And I think that it's a way we have, and I see close parallels between our relationship with place and our relationship to the natural world. And I think, I mean, they're very similar things, but not completely. But I think one of the things about them is noticing, is full engagement, full immersion, and that sort of alertness that brings out and allows us to extend ourselves, but also to sort of examine our relationship with the world, or re-examine it.
Absolutely. Another comment from Sheila. Thank you, Sheila. Yup, Tony and his wife put prop rocks on the map. Indeed.
They really did, exactly, yes. Yeah. And again, it's, I mean, the sheer number are something extraordinary themselves, and the way they often relate to Router, but also to other places as well. And I could have a lot of fun sort of speculating to which ones they refer. But it's one of those things that I mean, it's a sort of dynamic landscape in the sense that these things are still being found, and prop stones particularly. There aren't any stone circles lurking perhaps beneath the surface, but there might be. But prop stones are things that sort of emerge as you notice, as you look more closely at landscape, you begin to notice these prop stones.
Yes,
So
it's true.
In a way, cumulatively, they're the sort of the most moving monuments on Bodmin Moor. It's
Yes.
not the most spectacular.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's an intimacy in Bodmin Moor that you don't get in other places. Stonehenge is fantastic. It is the, its scale alone is beyond belief. Is extraordinary. But on Bodmin Moor and on other areas as well, and you've explored other areas in
Mm.
Cornwall certainly. I think there's an intimacy. There's a scale that is very much a human scale, and maybe you'd like to
Yeah,
tell
and I
us a
think
little bit more.
I think the most rewarding thing about it, in a way, is that it's not sort of it's not curated in any way. Stonehenge. I mean, there's a wonderful visitor centre now, and it's very informative, and you follow it. But it's known, and we know Stonehenge, and yet anyone can go to Bodmin Moor, and it doesn't have that familiarity. It doesn't have a visitor centre. It doesn't have anything like that, and so you can immediately immerse yourself in it. And also, exactly, other places in Cornwall. I mean, out to the moors of the far west, West Penwith, have the same sense. I mean, same and different. I mean, they have their own
Yes,
particular sort of mood about them, but in a way, they have that same power of place, the same spirit, the same sort of sense of layeredness, and also with reference to one particular hill. That's what's so extraordinary about a lot of places in Cornwall. They refer to two or three different places. And if there was a map I saw when I was working with this that talked about view shadows. So it was looking at monuments from this period, from the late Neolithic, all over Cornwall. And you could see in particular places there were lots, and they were scattered around, but there were lots of places where there sort of weren't, definite places where there weren't. And those are places in valleys where you couldn't see any of these hills. So it's a sort of confirmation by negation, if you like, that they were about looking, visual reference to sort of distant hills. And again, it's something we can engage with. Um,
absolutely, absolutely. You were mentioning. Oh, let's go to a couple of comments here,
hmm.
and. Sheila Harper, do people listening know how big some of these prop rocks are? That they were moved in but they're huge, yes. They're a few tons at least. And I think this is the other thing. This is an intentional design because the effort to go into plan, select, source the material and move it into place is a very much is by design, has been planned. It's not something that's done on the spur of the moment. So there's an awful lot of planning, which to me indicates the notion that these early farming communities were far more advanced than what we are often led to believe. They weren't savages, they weren't primitive, they were very sophisticated thinkers, very attached to the land. And let me just pull up another comment. John Webb. For one of the group from across the pond, I have to thank Philip for his book. It was my book at bedtime for many evenings as I was mentally transferred. I'll just pull that up again. As I was mentally transferred to my homeland. Wow.
Oh, okay. So someone drawn back to Cornwall. Good. Well,
Excellent.
I'm glad of that.
Thank you so
I think
much. Yes.
yeah, and it's interesting, that sense, because I think there are two things going on. I mean, I think that we feel attached to particular places, to our homeland, to our roots, perhaps where we were. But I think there's also something universal about it as well, and that's, so both those things are going on. Um, and one of the things that interested me was how the stories attached to particular um, natural features was sort of common to lots of different places. I mean, for instance, um, hills are traditionally the place of heroes and gods, buried heroes, or the dwelling place of gods. And yeah, I mean, I think that's a sort of universal thing. And there's a very interesting uh, theory about the sort of development of the Arthurian cycle in Britain, that actually there are 100 different sites around Britain, with an Arthurian connection. So you think, well, a lot of them do refer to particular episodes in the stories. But another way of looking at it, which I find convincing, is that actually they were local. They were a whole series of local traditions of a hero that were then brought together under the single figure of Arthur by Geoffrey of Monmouth, who had his own particular sort of political reasons for sort of amalgamating this sort of hero who fought and things. But actually, what it was lots of people who found in the local hills, Arthur's Seat in Edinburgh, a sort of heroic shape to the land. And so there is, I think, something really interesting sort of ethnographically, if you like, about the way that particular shapes of the landscape around the world bring out particular sort of impulses and responses in us. And that's as well as the sort of universal thing of exile and us all, I did several books about exiles, about the Armenians who are sort of displaced people and the extraordinary sort of yearning for particular places that you've lost and a particular map, particular village or town that you've left, which is a very powerful thing. But I think there's also a universal response to the shape of the land.
Absolutely.
That's I think sort of buried underneath that site-specific mythology of place. There is a sort of there's something that is universal.
Yes, definitely. And on that note, here's a comment by John Webb. Follow-up question: is it possible to map your routes using OS Maps or Google Earth? Is it possible to map your routes?
Do you mean the particular route I took through Cornwall? Yes, it is. I mean, I walked from Bodmin Moor. I went to Tintagel and down to the Clay Country, and then across the Fell and into the and that way into the far west of Cornwall. And Tintagel is an interesting place. Sorry, another example of the way that a particular dramatic natural feature has lent itself to stories is the island of Tintagel.
Yes.
Which is sort of connected now, reconnected by a new bridge, but the idea that this sort of isthmus connected the sort of real and the imaginary, and these layers that Richard of Cornwall built the castle there in order to embrace its sort of power, but it all goes back to the physical feature, the sort of the almost chance element of a bit of rock attached to the mainland by a thin bit of land, and the sort of imaginary response that has, something that's so physical can provoke a sort of imaginative response and a narrative response to us. Geoffrey Monmouth tells this story about, it would take 3 men to guard Tintagel Island against all the armies of Britain, and again, you see the way that something physical lent itself to that. And you can again, it's an English heritage site, and you can go and visit it along the new bridge.
Absolutely.
So that was that was a similar thing for me. Bodmin Moor, which is layers and layers of story, which we don't really know. Tintagel is more specific, and we're still reinterpreting. We still go to Tintagel village, and it's a very dynamic place with lots of wonderful and weird things going on. And it has that capacity. Glastonbury, I had a chapter in this book about Glastonbury. Again, it's a place which archaeologically, historically, and in a contemporary sense, has people responding in their own kind of weird and wonderful ways to a particular feature. Glastonbury Tor, this extraordinary island in the middle of the Somerset Levels.
Well, you're absolutely right, because I read somewhere that Tintagel is probably the most popular site of archaeological site, one of the most popular sites in Britain, actually, in terms of people, attendance going there.
It's certainly in Cornwall, exactly.
Yeah, definitely. Now, on that note, would it be possible to read us? Do you have a piece you could read to us?
Yes, I mean, sure, I don't want to interrupt the discussion, but I mean, yes, if you like, there's a couple of paragraphs I've got here about Bodmin Moor and sort of one of the early visits I took. It's not very long, and it's a sort of it's not a reading. It's just a sort of brief dip into this book
Great.
and an idea exactly around it. So I was staying up in this sort of deserted farmhouse on the northwest, but below Routor, and using it as a base to explore the moor. And after the first night there, I went for a walk. So the next day, I left early to walk out to Stow's Pound. Mist covered everything, wrapping its grey cloth around the shoulders of the hills, filling the valleys, until the sun rose and it vanished. Then there was the A30 to cross at Jamaica Inn, and a bit of road walking, and a couple of dull blocks of conifer plantation. But my memory of that day is not of these things. It's of the endless open, the bare expanses of grassland, a flock of curlew rising near Kilmartor, a ruined farm at Rushyford, weed waving in a stream, Tormentil in the spongy sward, the warm wind, and that sense of intoxication that comes from too much sun, too much space, or too much time spent on your own. In this case, all three.
Wonderful.
I followed no path. I crossed lines of grassy banks, past low mounds. A cuckoo put its two-note query to the morning. On the edge of Craddock Moor, I stood over a sheep's carcass. The head was gone, and the blood-crusted trachea flopped out over the neck. I puzzled at numerous lumps of granite and began to identify various coffin-sized boulders that had not been arranged by gravity. Once you think you see one prop stone, you see them everywhere. You spot design in the clitter falls, deliberate curves on the open terrain, shapes in the clouds. Something about the blankness of the moor makes you react against it and fill it with significance, or anything. I remembered a passage in an essay by Jonathan Rayburn. He was sailing for the first time off the Pacific coast when his depth sounder suddenly showed the water shallowing. The seabed was rising towards him. What was it, a group of rocks or shoals? Grabbing his chart, he checked his position. But rather than shallowing, he saw that the bottom had in fact dropped off the edge of the continental shelf. Faced with nothing, the sonic pulses were turning the tiniest speck in the water into something significant.
Wonderful.
So that's kind of
Absolutely
the idea
wonderful.
that actually the sort of cosmic speculation that being out in that sort of open space brings to us, with just the moor and the clouds and the sky. You mentioned the sort of archaeology and astronomy and the way that's been mixed. And again, at night you can have that same sense, but it's the sort of blankness that brings out those questions, I think.
Yes. Yes, photographing at night, because a lot of the photography I did was at night. It's extraordinary, and because I went photographing with the new moon most of the time, it's really dark, and we're not accustomed to that degree of darkness. And it's kind of medieval dark, where there's no lighting whatsoever, and then you can sense the darkness in at night in a very, very, very different way. Also, the fact of being in Bodmin Moor, usually around Routor primarily, where I photograph, you can see the edge of Bodmin Moor by the lights on the periphery. And again, that's a very strange kind of feeling, because we don't normally see street lighting or cars, vehicles on the edge of, literally almost on the horizon. So that's quite a novel sort of experience.
And you also have that sort of visual experience at night, kind of inverse experience on a very starry night with a new moon, but a very sort of clear night. And the shape of the land comes through negative space, because it's darker than the sky. So you get these sort of intense scattering of stars, which are interrupted by this blank space, which is the black shape of a hill. And so you get the sort of negative space of the hill almost more powerfully than during the day.
Absolutely, absolutely.
But you can get quite lost. I mean, I find you can get quite lost in the sort of astronomical alignments of things like the hurlers and things. And personally, I find that kind of almost too a step too far. I mean, it is fascinating. There's been lots of calculations about how the hurlers perhaps reflect three different eras when the North Star shifted, and in each it was referring to the North Star, but the North Star over hundreds of years had shifted. Wonderful idea, and in a sense, I think that what those places are doing is simply bringing out those ideas that allow us to speculate in all sorts of ways.
Yes.
And I feel that actually just on that it's tempting to sort of, when you go to those stone circles or the prop stones you were talking about and that design, the people were doing it, why did they do it? What does it show us about their society? Was it hierarchical? Was it, as you said, sort of very sophisticated? I think there's another way of looking at it, and I think I like to think of those monuments as more like works of art, in the sense that they're not there for a particular purpose, but they're there as a reflection of the mysteries in themselves, or as a reflection of the beauty of the universe and the mysterious beauty of it. So rather than having a particular function, they're there just to reflect our own sort of humble ignorance, if you like, and our own wonder at the things that we can't know. And I think if one does that, you sort of enter a different space and a different sort of experience of the things. And there is something about, and I find myself, you want to know, well, when? Okay, when was this monument built? Who built it? Why did they build it? You want to know fixed answers. But that sort of instinct in us, I think, should be resisted. And you should think, if you go to your Uffizi in Florence and look at the great Renaissance paintings, they're not explicit. They do something to us that we can't really explain. And I think that's similar. And it does something to us in each age. It tells us something about us and something about us collectively.
Absolutely.
So that was something I took out of those few years I spent sort of digging around all the sort of Neolithic and early Bronze Age ritual archaeology. That was sort of idea that I find refreshing.
Absolutely. I would thoroughly agree. And that's one way of actually engaging with them and taking them in, rather than actually trying to find some sort of reason, but rather than just enjoying them for what they are. Let me go to a couple of comments here. Felicity Warner, evocative and beautiful. Thank you. That was your reading, Philip. Thank you so much. Thank you, Felicity, for your comment. Also, another comment, Karen. Thank you, Philip. Lyrical and tense, beautifully spoken.
Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. That's great. Excellent.
So we've got a few people from Cornwall and a few from across the pond, as you said.
Yes, it's interesting that we have locals and from the other side of the Atlantic. That's great. Well, wonderful. Excellent. Well, this has been really, really interesting. Thank you so much, Philip. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
No, I mean, I just to say that, I mean, for me personally, how much an engagement. I mean, it's a great, one of the sort of benefits of being a writer is that you can immerse yourself in particular subjects. And it was 2 books ago that I wrote about this particular place, but it's something that really changed my reaction to the world and how I feel we are in it. So that's what it taught me. All those days and weeks I spent up on Bodmin Moor and in similar places. It left me with a real sense of well, it being not more rooted, because that sounds sort of, it's a particular place, but more sort of more engaged in the world and more concerned about it and more loving of it in a way, I suppose.
Absolutely. Yes, I think it does have this effect. Look, another comment. Felicity Warner. I don't know Bodmin Moor very well, but I will take a trip up there tomorrow. Indeed. Well, good idea.
Anyone who can. I mean, people, and we're in the middle of summer, so we've had a number of visitors, and I always encourage people actually to go to Bodmin Moor because it's so tempting. I mean, Cornwall's so wonderful, so sort of blessed with coastline and wonderful places, but Bodmin Moor just isn't that visited, and it's and that's one of its joys. But it's somewhere which is just a revelation, and it's a slow burn. It's a slow love,
Where would you recommend
Well,
Felicity
I mean,
to
I mean,
go first?
annoyingly,
What's her first
we
port
had
of call?
we had some guests this morning, and actually, I mean, annoying in a way, the two sort of obvious places are at opposite, completely the opposite ends. You've got, as you mentioned, the hurlers down at Minions on the southeast corner, which also has, by the way, some really interesting industrial archaeology from
Yes,
that more recent period of when the minerals were explored. So that's one area, and half a day there, you can see the cheese ring, you see the stone circles there, and Willerton, where they found the Gold Cup. But the other really spectacular place is the northwest corner, around Roughton,
yes,
and to walk sort of to go in from Blissend and up from the Delank River, up to Roughton is a wonderful thing. But from Roughton down to Minions is a well, it's a pretty good day's walk. It's 20 miles or so. Um,
absolutely. Yes,
but
those
it really
those
it's a sort of place, because you can see Router and other places from wherever you are. It's a place that really you could just pick anywhere and walk in any direction, and be aware of those tours on the skyline, and sort of watch how they change and how they might refer to particular things in the landscape.
definitely. I think that's very good advice. I think another place that's rather interesting I would recommend is Galitha Falls by the river. Foy.
Yes, yes, on the Foy
There's
River. Yeah.
the ancient forest,
Mm,
and that is another magical place. No ruins there, no ancient ruins.
no,
There's industrial remains there,
mm,
but that little walk along the part of the River Foy that then ends up being the huge estuary that seems,
yes, yes,
that starts with this more or less a stream that starts in Bodmin, high up in Bodmin Moor, has that huge bend on Galitha Falls, which is absolutely wonderful. And then when you reach the estuary, that's your neck of the woods, isn't it, Philip? You're around that part of the
Well,
world.
no, I'm on the Fal Estuary,
Oh,
not the
right,
Foy
right,
Estuary.
right. Not the
The,
Foy,
the,
the
the Fal
Fal.
a bit further west, but the upper reaches. But it's
Yeah,
interesting. I mean, Bodmin Moor was originally called Foymore, or another word,
that's right.
Foymore, like as Dartmoor's called after the River Dart.
That's
So
right.
or the other way around, and the Galitha Falls, the beautiful woodlands, those sort of moss-covered rainforests, the western rainforest. But of course, one of the things about the high moor is that there aren't any trees. So actually, yes, it gives one a thirst for woodland, and you can tuck into that bit of the moor. It's got everything. I
Absolutely.
sound like a tourist guide, but it's well worth it.
Absolutely. Yes, look, another comment. Karen, thank you, Harry, for your insightful discussion and input. Well, thank you, Karen, very much. It's very kind of you. Thank you. Excellent. That's wonderful. Well, Philip, thank you so much for being this evening with us. This has been really amazing, an amazing conversation. Thank you, and I think we've had a good crowd, and it's been almost like a little family. So yes, thank you so much.
It's been great. Thank you all of you, really.
Excellent. Okay, and on that note, I'll say bye bye. Thank you so much, Philip, and hope to
Thank
see you
you.
soon. We'll be in
Yeah,
touch soon, so definitely we'll
great.
we'll follow up from here.
Okay.
Have a very good night. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye for
Thank you
now.
all. Right.
Okay, great, folks. Thank you so much for joining us in this evening's studio event at the studio. Remember that on Friday we have Frances Liddle, who's a researcher at the University of Manchester, and she's talking about NFTs, non-fungible tokens, and that is the big thing hitting the art world. Digital assets, either GIFs, JPEGs, videos, sound, right, that then are actually sold as digital and bought and sold as digital assets. And that is, her research is looking at the NFTs within the context of museums and how the art world is adapting to this. Following her talk on the following Monday, we have Jackie Nowakowski. She's an archaeologist, and she'll actually be giving us the proper lowdown on from an archaeologist perspective. She's an expert in her field. And after that, the next Monday, we have Carolyn Kennett, who is an an archaeoastronomer, and again, she's extremely knowledgeable and well worth seeing. So do join in those conversations, and we look forward to see you then. Felicity, a couple of comments there. I shall make a picnic and make a day of it. Indeed, you must go to Bodmin Moor. You must. It's unmissable. You'll love it. Trust me. And another comment, very enjoyable. Thank you. Excellent. Thank you for being here, Felicity. And Sheila, Minions is probably best for a beginner. I would agree with that, actually. A good book for discovering the archaeology, including Bodmin Moor, is the late Craig Weatherhill's book, Ancient Sites of Cornwall and Scilly. I'll just put that up again. Ancient Sites of Cornwall and Scilly by the late Craig Weatherhill. Sheila, thank you so much. I'll follow that up. That's excellent to know. Okay, folks, thank you so much. From me, Harry Fricker, I'll say good night, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now. Have a great day ahead. Bye.